Minecraft roleplay is a spectacle that's been around for a very long time, but was finally pushed back into the mainstream with the resurgence of SMPs during 2020. But before this modern era of SMPs with vague lore, MCRP was much more scripted and something akin to real TV. This niche evolved into something that everyone could look back on with simple nostalgia. But hidden behind the veil of CHiLDHOODS, there was a mysterious figure that many forgot about, and to this day still remains in the shadow of his former popularity. A figure who, despite this, had changed the scene forever. August 17, 2015, Samgladiator and his crew would upload a series that would shake the grounds of Minecraft storytelling forever. Unknown to even themselves, they had begun collectively creating one of the most infamous Minecraft web series of all time. A monument that can never be replicated and yet still leaves so much to be desired. A series called Yandere High School. With inspiration derived from Yandere Simulator, YChess quickly garnered the spotlight of children all over the world who had morbid imaginations and wanted to see it explored through the form of pixelated block people. After all, Minecraft was a familiar image, so seeing it now applied to something more mature, a popularized anime genre based on murder, it was only a matter of time before it became bigger than itself. But with over 20 million views on its decade-old debut episode, YChess can no longer be viewed as an idol of the present, but rather as a fragment of the past. So now, 10 years later, with multiple reboots and spin-offs, there's one last question to ask ourselves. Has YChess stood the test of time? Yandere High School was a Minecraft roleplay originally created by Samgladiator with his co-star Joey-ish, aka Tortoise, on August 17, 2015. And as you could probably guess, it was heavily based off the infamous Yandere Simulator. And since this was early on in that game's development and, the hot water of the developer was little less known, the popularity of that franchise quickly seeped into YChess's own success. And not only that, MCRP in general was becoming more of a common medium. For example, you might recall a similar roleplay being created around this time, one Yandere High School by It's Funny. By the way, yes, the tags are as confusing as you might think. Only recently has AO3 finally divided the It's Funny and Samgladiator YChess tags, but And of course, there were other YChess roleplays as well. Carflow comes to mind. He also had a Yandere High School series, which, holy poll by the way, does anyone remember Minecraft Family? And that just goes to show how entertaining this style of gameplay was, particularly for young artists and weird kids. It's no wonder that creatives were drawn to this sort of thing. It was essentially a collaborative writing project between hilarious close friends, especially if it was coded in familiar media that kids already liked. Minecraft, and in YChess's case, Yandere Simulator as well. But to preface this, YChess is not at all like Yandere Simulator, contrary to what you might believe. Calling YChess the Minecraft version of Yandere Simulator is very, very inaccurate. And while I don't remember much of It's Funny, I'm sure that calling her YChess series a Minecraft version of Yandere Simulator would be a bit more accurate, but even then, I doubt it's one-to-one, which is what people still somehow believe, even though YChess does not resemble Yandere Simulator at all beyond the Yandere in High School concept. Of course, there's also the fact that it took Yandere-chan as a character, but at the same time, they basically rewrote her. Spoiler alert, I really like Chan. She is so interesting, not just for what she does for the story, but in the way that they handle her from a meta perspective. I'm going to talk about her a ton in the summary portion of this video, but just know she is incredible, and to use her as a talking point for the fact that Yandere High School is just Yandere Simulator but Minecraft would just be another disservice that you're doing to the series. But if we're talking about, inaccuracies about YChess, there's a certain bird in the room that we need to address before we really move on. In fact, this bird might be the reason why you clicked on this video, even if you never grew up with YChess yourself. And let's not beat around the bush. You know who it is, and you can tell by the way I look, I know who it is as well. I know him very, very well. Korean Minecraft. In recent years, he's a hermit crafter, a life serieser. But what if I told you that back then, during YChess, he would become the token British character who pretended to be several people and later killed several people? Well, whether or not you knew about that, I just wanted to take a moment for you to just remember everything you've ever learned about YChess through QUiNN fan content and completely forget about it. This might come across as cynical, but let me make one thing clear. I complain about QUiNN in a loving way. Not because I love QUiNN as a character or as a content creator, not because I love QUiNN fans or because I love YChess as a fandom, but because I love YChess itself. I find that a lot of QUiNN fan content not only mischaracterizes QUiNN himself, which is ironic but actually not. It's kind of fitting that the more you like something, the more you mischaracterize it. But point being, QUiNN fans mischaracterize YChess and gives it a bad rap. I mean, yeah, YChess is kind of terrible, but at least criticize it for things that are accurate. And I'm saying this as someone who loves YChess. There's a lot of things I'm gonna make fun of YChess for, but I want to emphasize this. I'm making this video not to make a dig at people who pretend they've watched YChess with their eyes opened, even though back then that might have been my motivation. I'm not making this video to nostalgia bait you. I mean, I'm not Samuel England, am I right? I'm making this video because I love YChess and I love what's done for me as a person. This might sound weird, but I don't know where I'd be without this series. And honestly, I think I'm not the only person who believes that. So, with all that being said, welcome to my 10 years later analysis of YChess. A tribute to my childhood. Sit back with some Doritos and try to enjoy it. Hey, by the way, for clarity, I'm gonna refer to the character as Samgladiator or just Sam, but the content creator behind him is gonna be Samuel England or just Samuel. Please keep that in mind or else you're gonna be really confused at points. YChess is a series that I could only describe as a comedy drama. It follows Sam and his best friend Tortoise through a wacky slice-of-life portrayal of Japanese high school. Even though this version of Japan is clearly inaccurate, and it's really only set in Japan because of the Yandere simulator inspiration. And another thing to mention is that the world overall is fantastical and unrealistic. There's non-humans around, and Sam himself is a rabbit hybrid. Don't listen to anyone telling you that ears are just part of the hat, because they're lying to you. Even Samuel himself, because he cannot keep a consistent character trait to save his life. All he does is contradict himself, but I think it's pretty obvious that his intention was for him to be a bunny hybrid. Okay, we're not gonna talk about this anymore. Anyways, like I was saying, the world of YChess is totally magical, because magic is real. We have Ellen the fortune teller and the confirmation of legitimate paranormal happenings like ghosts. There's a bunch of other things too, like aliens and minions from Despicable Me existing. Also Donald Trump, which is the biggest fantastical beast of all time. But those are specifically from the sequel Tokyo Soul. And one last thing. This series has a bunch of characters who are ripped from existing media. Paul Blart, Pepe Frogman, and Majo Ellen specifically. But then there's also characters like the Pylord and Star Force 36 who are unique characters, but they have their design stolen from, well, you can obviously tell. That's just something I wanted to mention, because I imagine it must be pretty confusing to see fan art of YChess and recognize the characters, but not in the way that you think. And also because, later on in Tokyo Soul, they take the references even further. You thought I was joking about the Donald Trump thing? I wasn't. But now that we have the rules for the world laid out, we now have to summarize the story. And yes, usually I would say summarizing is kind of redundant because I expect that you know the story, but YChess is admittedly a freaking monster to get through. Even if you have watched YChess, and that's more than what most YChess fans can say, you still probably don't remember a lot of little things. Not little details, but little plot beats that gradually build up to something. Especially if it's unintentional, so it gets less attention. So because of that, we are going to have a rapid fire summary where it's just a bunch of bullet points and very weird transitions, but believe me, it's needed. Not just to lay out the story for you, but also so that I can properly analyze little things without having to give context for it every time I bring it up in a disjointed section. So, here we go. Sam and Tortoise wake up for their first day of second year, because yes, they do have a canon grade. It's second year. Does it make sense? It's a little ridiculous considering the things that they do in the series, and Silly has gone on record saying that they never really considered their ages when doing anything, and also they celebrate prom, which is usually a junior-senior thing, but I'm willing to cut them some slack because I don't think they ever actually do directly contradict themselves on this. Does it make sense? To me, personally, I don't think so, but if you like child soldier storylines, then this is really good for you. And also, for the prom thing, as much as it bothers me, YChess is also set in Japan. They shouldn't be celebrating prom in the first place, but that's besides the point. They go to school. They meet a few wacky characters, but most importantly, they meet Professor Gareth, the depressed, cynical, passive-aggressive, honestly not a good teacher. But while I'm at it, I'll do a quick rundown of every single student since we're already mentioning the school ensemble. And also because I love the entire cast, but there's not really a smooth way to introduce them all individually. First of all, only half of them get highlighted and it's in very few and far between scenes. And two, the greater fandom ignores them as much as the main character does. Before anyone gets smart with me, yes, I know there's side characters for a reason, but then there's prominent support characters who get ignored just as much. Like, yeah, I'm not expecting you to know Gracie loves you, but why are you talking about her as much as you talk about a character like Jay the Star? It just doesn't make sense to me. So here's a quick rundown of every single character, if not for some clarity, then just for my self-indulgence.
Jay the Star is the OG Grand, Hidden Sentinels is a prince, Sukiyaki is Sam's crush, Soul Owl is Suki's girlfriend, Domrao is Sam's bully, PD Power Dragon wants to know if it glows in the dark, Sir Cutie Yuki is definitely not the Yandere, Chan Yandere is definitely the Yandere, JTS, not to be confused with Jay the Star, is from Denmark, I mean Norway, I mean Sweden, Silly Jilly is the kid of the teachers, the Pylord talks and mumbles, Major Ellen talks to ghosts, Starforce 36 is a geek, Euro versus the World / Euro Lovel is a nerd, Invader Gaming has a crush on Sam, Pepe Frogman is poor, Pufferfish Patty is Pepe's girlfriend, I'm Seb is a police officer, Prime Gamer JC is Dom's lackey, Gracie Loves You is blue, Mega Necra is Silly's brother,
and Silix Brown is Tortoise's dead girlfriend. Well, not right now. First, we have to see Gareth get depressed over his ex-wife Jane's death, kill himself, and then Prime Dom, Tortoise, Sam, and Salix have to go to the haunted school where they see his ghost, and then Salix dies. Not because of the ghost, but because she gets ran over an hour later, just like how Ellen foretold just the day before. This leads Tortoise and Sam to suspect Ellen as Silix's killer, because this has to be intentional. But it doesn't really matter, because the mystery almost immediately goes on the back burner, when we now have some other miscellaneous plots. And this is where things get rapid. Well, until I have to pick everything apart. Tortoise starts selling Doritos as his own brand Doritos. The main duo are getting evicted. Hey, here's drugs. Wait, Stormform? Weren't you in the date episode in a completely different outfit? Sam and Tortoise sell the drugs to teacher Okami. They buy a new house. Okami, Paul, and Silly help do a drug bust on Storm. He's dead now, but we'll see his actor in a suspiciously similar skin as a different character later. Sam's obsession with Suki is reaching a new high, so he proposes to her with a big diamond ring. However, Suki is a lesbian, and Sam is evidently not. Never mind, just kidding, he is. I mean, she is. This is Samantha, wearing the clothes of Tortoise's dead girlfriend Salix. Dom falls in love with Samantha, and ironically, Invader is acting really cool and is trying to warn her about how crazy Dom is. Get it? Because Invader's crazy for Sam, and now she's warning Samantha about having someone like that. Samantha tries to poison Suki's girlfriend, Soul. Unfortunately, Suki gets the poison. She doesn't die though, she just has a broken neck. But while this is all happening, they have a money issue, because Sam spent all of their money on the failed Suki proposal. So in episode 23, they both end up talking to Landlord Green to ask if he could help them pawn off the ring. And for whatever reason, we actually have a brief episode recap in the beginning of this episode, which is weird because this does not happen at all before this, and I don't even know if it continues to happen after this episode. Unfortunately, it turns out that Green wants to pawn off the ring to Yakuza Karu, who looks suspiciously a lot like Stormform from earlier. And then Sam and Tortoise realize this guy is probably in the Yakuza, and now Sam is trying to pawn off a fake ring. Now, I don't think Sam is as stupid as other people make him out to be, but this is definitely like the peak of his stupidity. This was very avoidable. Tortoise literally warns him that maybe they shouldn't try to mess with a gang member, but Sam decides to anyway, because who cares about what Tortoise says? Not Sam, by the way. It's also worth noting that we get confirmation that Kaoru is aware of the previous drug bust. There's also implications that QUINN is working for Kaoru as well. He brings Sam and Tortoise to them because he knows that Kaoru will take the ring. But there's also a comment that Kaoru makes where he asks QUINN, do you have the intel about the drug bust? So I just have to ask, is QUINN like an informant for the Yakuza? I mean, that would make sense. He's the landlord. That gives him connections and allows him and the Yakuza to break into people's apartments, which is something that both of them do. But later on, we find out about the Yakuza hit list, and QUINN is not on it. So he doesn't even owe them money, but he still goes out of his way to interact with Hikaru for the ring pawning, even though he doesn't have to, and he's clearly scared of him. So maybe it's like a favor situation? Actually, maybe that's why he's breaking into the main duo's apartment. Like he was trying to find proof that they were involved in the drug bust? I don't know. QUINN's not important, but I just wanted to talk about it because 1, I think it's interesting and can showcase how powerful the Yakuza are, and 2, this unintentional character importance kind of parallels QUINN's history with the Samgladiator channel overall. I don't doubt that the main duo would have met him regardless because of the drug bust. However, QUINN gives them a direct meeting with the big boss, and is the reason why they get into real trouble with him later, you know, because of the deal. And now, if you compare this to how QUINN was always an important player of Samuel's old videos, it's almost like a quiet nod to how Samuel's content had grown at this point, but he was still working with the same cast of actors that he had always been when he was less popular. So regardless of whether or not QUINN is on screen for longer than 5 minutes in YHS, he still serves a subtle, important role. But let me get off my soapbox because this is a turning point for the main duo. They point out to each other after successfully doing the trade that a plastic ring is very noticeably different from a diamond ring. And they're right. So how did they get away with that trade if Kaoru was inspecting the product right in front of their faces? Well, this is just my thoughts, but I honestly think that Kaoru just pretended to not notice. And in a move befitting of the YHS Wolf and Sheep's clothing theme, he's shelving this away as an excuse to antagonize the main duo when he really wants to later on. Especially since, from what I remember, I don't think the drug bust mystery ever gets a proper conclusion. I like to believe that Kaoru knew about the main duo's involvement in the first place, but now with this ring, he can consider the main duo enemies to the Yakuza either way. You might think this is a huge stretch, but I find that a lot of people don't really consider how important manipulation is to YHS. We see Sam and Yuki being underhanded, and yet people still treat them as cartoon villains with very transparent motives and attitudes. And yeah, they're cartoony sometimes, but they are legit tricksters. So I think to make this whole theme more obvious, it feels appropriate to apply this threat tactic to the other main antagonist, Kaoru, especially since we do see later down the line, he is very manipulative. It would also add another dimension to how he interacts with Sam specifically, because he doesn't end up being as mad with Sam as you'd think. It's almost like he wasn't actually tricked and was just pretending to be so he had leverage. But maybe I'm manipulating myself right here. In episode 29, we get the debut of Teresa. We also get the debut of one of the most iconic YHS fanarts ever. We also meet Pepe in this episode, and I know a lot of people don't like him, and it's understandable why, but I actually think he's pretty enjoyable when they're not doing the fantasy racism roleplay, which sounds confusing since that's like 90% of his runtime, but I think his interactions with Sam and Tortoise are super interesting. We see Sam consistently root for Pepe, but with how apathetic Sam is, it's kind of hard to figure out if he's being genuine, and I like that ambiguity because it makes sense when you consider that he's in a different league than Pepe. More often than not, Sam is belittled and underestimated. But when you put him in the situation with a person who can't do that to him because he's 10 times more pitiful, then you could argue that maybe Sam does appreciate Pepe's presence. Though maybe Sam just likes to root for the underdog because seeing Pepe successfully get with Patty later down the line is similar to how he had pictured his own love story with Suki. Super wholesome, triumphant, and admittedly, one note. Honestly, I used to hate on the cross-dressing arc. I thought it was useless and just needlessly problematic, but it actually does set up two very important plotlines that would be pretty confusing without their debut here. Firstly, Dom's redemption, because he actually fully believes that Samantha and Teresa are two different people from their real identities, which causes him to be genuinely attracted to them. Funnily enough, we do find out a few episodes later that everyone else in the class already knew who they really were, except for Suki as well. So this means two things. Everyone in the class is woke and didn't mind the cross-dressing, and Suki is surprisingly as dumb as Dom. Also during this arc, Karu is actively searching for Sam, assumedly because of the scam deal that he pulled just a few episodes prior to Toris's debut. And so the duo then have to use their girl alter egos as a costume to get him off their scent. But if I can point something out, I don't actually know why Karu knew it was Sam who did the deal. Sam was dressed up as Samantha during the scene, and he's still dressed up as Samantha when Karu shows up to school. It's definitely just an inconsistency, but it does make Karu seem more like a mastermind if he's playing with his food, so to speak. Ignoring that though, it's pretty sick to see Rowan actually have a character in him, defending Sam and Tortoise from the Yakuza since he's so quick to recognize them. I think Rowan is a really great character, but I understand why people don't like him. They didn't know how to write him at the start of the series and they just played him off as a cliche perv teacher, but I think we could all agree that it was just impulsive on their part, because it's all either retconned or is just played off for one-off jokes in the first place. Another thing I want to point out here is that it's another instance of the rivalry between the SWAT and the Yakuza, as it's actually going to be a consistent plotline, which honestly is very rare for the series, so good job guys. And even besides these two plot-heavy things, this arc has a lot of great character moments, like Pepe's introduction, Sam's apathetic reaction to poisoning Suki, Sam tormenting Tortoise by wearing his dead girlfriend's outfit. Plus, there's even a surprising foreshadowing moment where Yuki goes on a hangout date with Teresa and Samantha. And if you know how prom goes, then you'll quickly realize what it's foreshadowing. I also want to add that Yuki at this point obviously prefers Tortoise to Sam, and always has since the start, but we get a lot of dynamic building between her and specifically Sam during the scene. They bond over Hunter x Hunter, and she makes a very fitting statement in which Hisoka is her favorite character. And Yuki is also the one to encourage Sam's dine and dash idea, while Tortoise is more hesitant. And, you know, Yuki encouraging Sam's criminal activity is maybe something to take note of. But another thing to take note of is that you can actually see Chan moving around in the background of the date scene. From her original seat behind Yuki to being behind Carl when the duo plus Yuki are talking to him. And considering Chan's involvement with Yuki later on, I don't think it's far-fetched to assume that she's moving around so she can keep her eyes on Yuki, which is probably unintentional, but I really like it. But after all of that, there's not much else I can talk about to distract myself from the elephant in the room regarding this arc, which is obviously the fact that Sam is canonically a cisgender man trying to get with a lesbian through cross-dressing. I don't personally have a foot in the race, but it wouldn't be right if I just ignored it. While it's likely not the intent of the actors, having a cis man dress up as his opposite gender just so he can prey on a lesbian who doesn't like him is definitely raising some flags for transphobia and lesbophobia. I shouldn't have to explain why, but considering they use terms like chop chop in substitution for bottom surgery, it's so on the nose that I'm actually surprised they don't say the word transgender once. I should also bring up the whole mystification of both Pi and Ellen's genders, mainly the latter, since somehow the show strikes twice as being unintentionally transphobic. Because there are a handful of scenes where the characters make a spectacle out of these two being androgynous. To make matters worse, I have to break the news that Ellen's actor was probably not playing Ellen to be intentionally genderqueer. I'm willing to bet that they just wanted to portray Ellen in the same way that anime portrays trans characters, in the sense that it's vague enough that they can have deniability, but they can also be praised for being woke. So call them when you want, but I think it's important to realize that Ellen isn't the proper representation that people make them out to be. At best, they're just gender apathetic, but at worst, they're played to be the punchline of genderless jokes. I should also mention Invader's hand in the whole why just transphobia thing. I know that in canon she's not meant to be trans. She's Canadian, but the entire bit about her is still just that she's a girl with a beard. Though, for what it's worth, the cast actually does treat her pretty normally, and it's just Sam who's off-put by her, and he gets, scrutinized for it as well. But she's still built as a joke character for that punchline. And yes, I'm aware that there's other situations in which a woman would have a beard, and why chess is still offensive from those angles. I just brought this up alongside the transphobia, since it's what she's often associated with. And similarly, I need to acknowledge the issue with Pepe, because I had teased it earlier, but it is something that needs to be fully addressed. In a better world, I could believe that it is possible to just ignore the fantasy racism and Pepe wouldn't be affected. And in fact, it would be a net positive, because in my opinion, the fantasy racism hard derailed Pufferfish Pete, who is already an established character. However, as it stands, Pepe is a total caricature of what white people thought was funny in 2015. Racism, specifically against black people. And this might be the part where you go into the comments and angrily write, "Why are you trying to cancel Samgladiator in 2026? Well, one, I'm just trying to acknowledge the issues in a mature way, and two, maybe you should wait around for the CC Discourse section before you actually get confused over that. Also, it's not like Samuel's responsible for everything in the series. Gareth literally played Pepe, but me talking about it isn't me trying to cancel Gareth, is it? But still, with all of that being said, I want to admit that I think this is a pretty good arc. So what's important is just acknowledging the origins of Samantha and not pretending like it's secretly a queer win, because it's not. Except for the Dawn part. That's actually pretty good. So it's costume day. Yuki tells Sam and Tortoise that she saw Chan with Salix's phone after her death, which is convenient because Tortoise had been receiving texts from Salix's number. So despite there not being any real proof of her telling the truth, they still believe her. So to expose her, they get help from the SWAT family, Okami, Rowan, and Silly. And suspiciously fast, they come to the conclusion that the killer was trying to get with Tortoise, which I guess with the language of the phone's texting makes sense, but that's still kind of a leap in logic. I'm surprised they figured it out that quick. Anyways, they make a plan with it. They're gonna use Yuki as bait by having her get close to Tortoise so that when she's vulnerable, they can bust the murderer who will be jealous. So later that day, they hide in the bathroom with Yuki taking a bath, because apparently that's prime murder time. But while they're hiding in the bathroom to bust Chan, they witness something interesting. Like Yuki suspected, Chan shows up to try and kill her. However, what she says appears off script to what the main duo had expected. Instead of sounding crazy and murderous, Chan only appears solemn, scolding Yuki of how she won't let this happen like last time. But before they can question it, Chan is arrested and they leave. And that's the end of it. But I want to go on a tangent here to rant about why these episodes stick out. For what it's worth, I do enjoy these episodes for how they actually address the murder mystery aspect of YHS, because, believe me, they kind of brush over the mystery a lot of other times. However, that's kind of the issue. Nothing in this mini arc really matters, despite how important it's painted out to be, because everything in these episodes, it kind of feels like they only exist for these episodes. Like, we get introduced to Chan as our red herring. Not in this arc, but way earlier on in the series. We assume that she's gonna be the Yandere because it's literally Yandere-chan, and there's misleading thumbnails, and because of a scene where Sam and Tortoise break into her house and watch her be conveniently suspicious. I didn't mention it till now since I didn't need to. But the point is that Chan has been built up as an over-the-top suspicious villain for about 30 episodes now. Not just on what she does, but in her existence itself. And then the bathroom scene breaks that down to reveal she's actually the opposite. She is an anti-hero. And yet, after this super cool development, nothing is actually done with it ever again. The most relevant it gets is that she indirectly causes Yuki to go crazy at prom, but it's not because of her own actions. It's just because Tortoise wants to cheer up Chan and Sam has no problems with ditching Yuki. That's the most long-term effect that Chan has, not even the fact that she knew Yuki was the murderer from the get-go. And it just feels so wasted to me. Not that her involvement is never mentioned again, because it is, but it's never in a satisfying way. As much as I do love Chan and Yuki's dynamic, I was never a fan of how juvenile it becomes without any payoff. Even when Sam realizes Yuki was the crazy one, he never apologizes to Chan. Not that I expect him to, but what about the others? Tortoise gets with Chan after prom, and it's brought up once in the Halloween arc, but it doesn't actually matter. She just kind of brushes over it. And that's a whole other thing. I am not a fan of Tortoise and Chan's relationship. Not to say I don't think it's interesting that Tortoise uses shallow romance to cope with Salix's death, but it is uninteresting when Chan gets reduced to only that. And even the shallowness isn't acknowledged. Like, how does she go from being the most intelligent, justice-driven character to someone suddenly being okay with dating a person who previously had a hand in her own injustice? Furthermore, how is she okay with being in the same friend group as the person who should have been punished instead of her? What little fight there was gets immediately dumbed down just so that she can be Tortoise's girlfriend and rival to Sam's girlfriend, contrary to being detective and rival to the murderer. You might think it's overreacting of me to complain about this, but it genuinely grates me. Chan has the capacity to be a great character, and we've seen it, but it's never fleshed out, so she's just a plot device for a plot that's only half there. Seriously, What's the point of having a murder mystery if it's almost immediately obvious that Yuki is the killer after Chan's arrest? Plus, it's especially weird because Chan, even if this arc didn't exist, should be a major character. She should be relevant because she's literally Yandere-chan, which, yes, I do like that they subvert her role, but I don't like that they subvert her importance. Not that she necessarily needed to be as plot heavy as Yuki, but I've always thought it was a missed opportunity to not even have her in the finale. But that's just my opinion. In the end, it's still great. She's still great. It's just kind of annoying to realize how night and day Chan's portrayal is from her red herring arc to the Halloween arc. But now that she's in jail, is the mystery really over? Well, no, because Sam's pretty unconvinced that it was Chan. Even though he did seem dismissive of the mystery during the last episode, I guess moving the plot along is more important than being consistent. Sam and Tortoise find Silix's diary to investigate, and they learn that she'd been stalked by Yakuza Karu, the exact guy that they messed with earlier. You know, the guy who definitely knows that they were a part of the drug bust because he's in the frickin' Yakuza. Inconveniently, they see him in the doorway and have to run away to school. Sam and Tortoise reveal their identities as Samantha and Teresa. Dom has a sexuality crisis. Literally everyone else sans Suki knew. They try to go home, but Tortoise had previously given away their keys. They sleep the night in Jay's place. It's pet day. Sam dresses Tortoise up as a turtle. Against his will. In his sleep. Sam does this a lot. It's confirmed that Sam is actually part rabbit and it's not just a hat. Sam goes to check out their apartment and he almost gets killed by an anvil dropping on his head. Turns out the Yakuza specifically want Sam dead, so they tried to kill him with the anvil to make it seem like he did it himself, finished with a fake note forfeiting all of his possessions to the Yakuza. They go to school. There's a missing texter in the classroom, and not that anyone cares, but Starforce's dog gets killed by Rowan because he's triggered by dogs. Rest in peace, Odin. You were the best character. Pepe asks Patty out to prom. Tortoise asks Yuki out to prom. To no one's surprise, Yuki says yes. But I will say, she takes a long time to say yes and actually dodges the question for literally 5 minutes straight. She's in a state of euphoria, I guess. But as much as I do think she's feeling genuine romance for him and can't handle it, that doesn't mean her romance for him isn't shallow. I think Yuki as a person just feels things intensely. But that doesn't really mean her emotions are inherently deep. She just experiences them deeply and then they're discarded as soon as the fantasy is tampered with. I'll talk more about Yuki's relationships later, but this is already a great example of her being romantic and yet somehow still avoidant with it in practice. Hey, do you want to know a fun fact? According to Miss Silly Jilly herself, there was meant to be a subplot where Silly asks Sam out to prom, and you can actually see a hint of it in this episode, because she prompts a random out-of-the-blue conversation with him in the asking people out to prom episode. But he literally just doesn't realize it, so she ends up ignored, which is something he does fairly often with the body actors. However, even though this subplot doesn't actually happen, there's a second glimpse of it where Tortoise suggests to Sam that he goes out with Silly instead of Yuki. If you still don't believe me, I unfortunately don't have the receipt of when she said this because it was in like a 2022 Twitch stream, but it is real. Well, it's as real as Yuro's Homestuck Shrine. Did you know he got kicked from the crew because he drew Suki x Sam? Obligatory beach episode! Did you forget this was an anime parody? Tortoise drives the bus to the beach. They meet Sam's friend who's visiting from England, QUiNN. They show QUiNN around the haunted school. Sam decides he wants to ask Yuki out to prom, much to Tortoise's dismay. They see Chan because she was released from prison for not having evidence against her. Who would have thought? Sam and Tortoise tell QUiNN to ask Chan out to prom even though he won't be there. She says she'll think about it. Yuki is seen spying on them. Chan and Yuki try to fight but it's interrupted. There's a sandcastle building contest. Chan tells QUiNN she'll go with him to prom, but only as friends since she already likes someone. Because QUiNN helps Sam, Sam's able to ask Yuki out, and Sam gives Yuki the idea of having a double date, as in, she dates both of them. And she agrees, because of course she does. Tortoise isn't happy about this. Man, does it just get worse from here. At least QUiNN goes home, and now it's prom. As expected, Yuki is ecstatic to be at prom with two guys. She's living my dream, so I can't really blame her. But she's gonna find out soon that her romance is nothing but a fantasy, because it's quickly revealed that Sam does not care about Yuki in specific. He just cares about Tortoise, which would normally be fine because Yuki's a Fujoshi, but even Yaoi can't heal a broken heart. So when Tortoise ditches her for Chan, since she's sad that QUiNN didn't show up, and Sam no longer has an incentive to stay with Yuki, she freaks out. She pulls out a knife, and that essentially confirms her as the villain for the series. But, like, she's been suspicious. Though I'm gonna point out here, it never comes up as a possibility that Yuki killed Salix, even though she's now openly violent and obsessive, which were the two traits that they assigned to Salix's hypothetical killer, but whatever. Maybe I'm just remembering wrong, but I wouldn't doubt it because they're kind of weirdly trusting of Yuki despite everything. Anyways, Yuki doesn't actually do anything until the prom after party, which actually takes place at her own house. And unfortunately for Sam, this only means that Yuki has no problem crashing the party with her knife. She screams to see Sam, and he has to hide in the house as everyone watches. He eventually runs away with Tortoise, and they escape to Chan's house where they'll stay for the night, which is cool because of the Chan and Yuki rivalry, but if I can complain about Chan's post-red herring characterization again, it's so weird. She has nothing to say about Yuki being openly villainous now. Chan was right all along. Sam even points this out as he tells her and Tortoise that Yuki pulled a knife on him, but she just shrugs and doesn't care. Girl, you're being vindicated by the person who helped throw you in jail. Where's your rage? Sigh. I must sound like a broken record complaining about this again, but there is one throwaway line that sorta satisfies me. When Sam is upstairs in the after party trying to get away, we can watch the chat to see everyone's reactions. And if you look closely, you can see that Yuki says, "Get out of my way, Chan." I'm sure it's just because Chan was literally in front of her, but I like to imagine that in a last-ditch effort to keep pursuing justice, Chan tries to fend her off before being pushed out by her teachers. Speaking of the teachers, by the way, I would complain that they don't do anything, but to be fair, they are drunk, so I'll give them a pass here. It's Halloween, and for some reason the Halloween episodes are counted as their own numbered videos, but they're still mainline canon, so I don't know why they're doing that. Anyways, we pick up directly after the last episode's events, except everyone's suddenly in their Halloween costumes. While trick-or-treating in the streets, the main duo plus Chan are approached by Karu. Wow, I wonder what wacky things are gonna happen now. Are they finally gonna address the attempted murder? The ring scam? The drug bust? They just kind of brush over it because Karu suddenly needs to exposit plot. He tells Sam that he needs to go out with Yuki or else unfortunate things will happen. Once again, showing that Yuki has a vendetta and new obsession specifically with Sam, not Tortoise like she used to. He must have icked her out when he didn't want to dine and dash back in the dinner date, because if set it off as tomming anything, nothing says true love more than almost getting arrested together. But can I ask, why don't they do anything about the fact that Karu was definitely involved in Salix's death? Like, at this point, they should realize the Yakuza have something more personal against them. Between the victimization towards specifically Sam and the fact they saw Karu in Salix's apartment right after he was described as being a stalker in her diary, surely they would know that something's going on, right? Actually, maybe I should stop using logic. They're stupid. At least, they're stupid enough to invite back our favorite Brit Grian in Minecraft. But we don't really get the whole group until Ellen joins under the guise of being Grian's new date. I mean, Ellen ditched Pi at prom and Grian ditched Chan, so I guess that's the real chemistry we need. So the gang we're sticking with for Halloween are Grian, Ellen, Chan, Tortoise, Yuki, and Sam. Not the most unpredictable gaggle, but it is kinda funny that Ellen is not nearly as relevant as these other characters. Their aura just transcends screen time, I guess. Anyways, as you can guess, the only normal couple is Chan and Tortoise, whereas the other two are tiptoeing between being real dates and just being forced into proximity. If you like Grian, that's cool, but they're very low-key in this arc and they're not even official. But on the other hand, Sam and Yuki are very official and they're making it everyone's problem. Throughout these episodes, we can see that Sam gradually warms up to Yuki, but it's not like he's beginning to enjoy her presence, but it's more like he's beginning to realize she will do anything that he wants, and that includes harming other people. We can see that as soon as Sam gets a little bit of power, he goes on an absolute trip with it. He has no problem weaponizing Yuki and threatening people, especially Grian, and she has no problem with it either, which, you can't let this man control your life like this. Well, I guess she can. She also kind of pressures Sam to do other things as well. We see later on that Yuki really wants Sam to be this Prince Charming character, but we know he's not that. He's not even close. And even in these episodes, she's honestly lucky that he ends up going along with her suggestion that they go into the haunted school. I don't know why they're doing that. They know the ghosts are real. They've seen them. I think everyone in the school has seen them at this point. But regardless, they're told to see who stays there the longest to prove who's the better boyfriend. But Chan, I know you have a rivalry with Yuki, but that's kind of messed up. Ghosts are real. You know the ghosts are real, and that includes Tortoise's ex-girlfriend. You're making your boyfriend confront his dead girlfriend to prove that he's a better boyfriend. Honestly, I think Chan's a bit more morally dubious than we give her credit for. Anyways, the competition actually doesn't matter. What matters is what happens when it ends. Oh my god. You know what happens. Tortoise makes an offhand comment disrespecting Yuki, and it triggers Sam because those are fighting words. So Yuki gives him a knife so that they can have a knife duel. Now clearly everyone is against it except for Sam, but Sam does what Sam wants and he stabs Tortoise, which means when Tortoise is driving QUiNN, because he's meant to leave Japan now, Tortoise passes out from blood loss and he crashes the bus, leading us into the infamous Tortoise 2 arc. Before I start talking about this arc, I want to clarify a few things. First of all, from now on, this is going to be a very, very sped up summary. Now that we're entering the popular part of YHS where most people already know what's happening, where people already talk about this stuff very often, I don't really feel the need to analyze it as much as I analyzed the earlier sections of YHS. So yeah, this is going to be really quick. Sam wakes up and Tortoise isn't home at the apartment. He finds Yuki and she starts acting like they've been dating for a while. She's very cutesy and very over the top. Now that she has what she wants, she's regressing back into an anime stereotype because she's trying to fulfill her role of being a girlfriend in a romantic fantasy. They find QUiNN and he explains that Tortoise crashed the train and now he's in the hospital. So what does Sam do? He doesn't apologize. He forces QUiNN to dress up as Tortoise and pretend to be him. So Sam is fully aware of what he's doing. His delusions don't become real delusions until like later on in the arc, but I want to point out that the reason why Sam gets to that point is because his environment isn't giving him repercussions for what he's doing. He has Yuki on his side, so he's able to threaten anyone, especially QUiNN, who speaks out against him. Also, for whatever reason, a lot of the background characters don't really make a scene about it. Jay the Star does not give a freak about QUiNN, and I think that's hilarious. And this isn't something new. We see multiple times that Sam is like essentially groomed into being the way that he is. He wasn't really helped when he was at his worst, and he's seen people be rewarded for acting terrible, so obviously he's adopted that behavior, along with the apathy that everyone seems to exhibit when he tried to repress his own. And now that the environment is like feeding into all of his worst qualities, it culminates into this arc being all about QUiNN suffering. Sam literally forces QUiNN to eat plastic bags because, another thing I'm gonna point out, we get a lot of insight into how Sam really thinks about Tortoise in this arc. He continuously dumbs down the concept of Tortoise. Even though Tortoise is a really complex person with a lot of good qualities, arguably more good qualities than Sam changes the narrative and makes it seem like he was the leader, he was the good one, and he was always the more responsible one out of the duo, which he was definitely the leader, but let's not act like he wasn't having Tortoise speak for him earlier on in the series. So at some point he chases QUiNN into the shed and he tries to force him to eat plastic bags, and we're gonna experience a rare occurrence of an adult trying to take charge of a situation. Unfortunately, this doesn't go through because Samuel does not read the chat. However, he does say something interesting.
Why are you saying you agree on? This is so confusing. I'm not going to the insane asylum. I'm not going back there again.
I'm sorry. What? What do you mean again? But if you think QUiNN gets away, he doesn't. He goes back to Sam and he keeps trying to reason with him, but obviously it doesn't work out. The two find Tortoise in the playground and he lost his memory. How convenient. And Sam literally invents a new identity for him, calling him Jerry. and shenanigans ensue. The trio need a new house because their house is trashed and they don't have a lot of money. So Yuki sets them up with her dad, who's gonna give them a job. And they finally make the connection, Yakuza Karu is Yuki's dad. So their job ends up being to collect money from people on the Yakuza hit list. And one of the people ends up being Rowan Artifacts, which is once again reminiscent of the Yakuza versus SWAT plotline. But this quest doesn't go unharmed. At some point, Jerry hits his head and Tortoise comes back. Thank God. They get caught by the police and they have to go into witness protection program to save their skin, I guess. So now the police want to use them to get information on the inside. They get disguises, they spy on the Yakuza, they arrest some Yakuza. Did you know that Neo Naxa is technically the only living member of the Yakuza? He's sent to jail and we never see him again, unlike the others. I guess he chose jail over dying for the Yakuza. That's my goat. But you know who does die for the Yakuza? Frickin' Karu. QUiNN, Sam, and Paul kill him in a dumpster. And also there's a mini subplot where Karu convinces Tortoise that he's his dad. Tortoise, I think you have daddy issues, but we're not gonna address that. Because the most important thing is to address Yuki's daddy issues. QUiNN dresses up as Karu. Yuki finds out. Yuki gets mad. Now, it's official. The Yakuza want QUiNN dead. And honestly, I'm all for it. But unfortunately, two people get caught in the crossfire. Right before the finale battle, Paul and Rowan try to confront Yuki and they both end up dead. But if I can say something, I really like the standoff between Rowan and Yuki, because Rowan is the most vocally against the Yakuza. However, we have Yuki, who's clearly part of the Yakuza. And, to throw in another factor, Rowan respects strong students, just like JTS. When he sees Yuki, he doesn't only see an evil little girl, he sees a formidable student who could prove him proud. Unfortunately though, she chooses the life of crime. And we see this in the finale. We have the SWAT, the main trio, and Dom facing off with the Yakuza. Sam one last time tries to reason with Yuki, but she's not hearing it. It's either QUiNN or everyone else. But the choice was made a long time ago. The battle commences. There's gunfire, there's a fishing rod, and in the night sky, only one person is left on the Yakuza's side. Yuki takes one last look at her teacher, her classmates, her former friends, and her past lover, who tries to beckon her away from the rooftop. But despite everything, she doesn't choose love. Even when his hands are out, she doesn't grab on. She only takes one step back, and her final line says it all. "You'll never take me alive!" And she falls, and she dies. YHS ends when the two ghosts, Gareth and Salix, come down. They're at peace now. Yuki killed Jane, and now that Gareth knows the truth, he can rest. And Salix is finally able to see Tortoise one last time and tell him goodbye. In the end, the main trio plus Dom have to move away to Tokyo. They can't stay here anymore, not after what happened, but that's a close on YHS, and they survived. Until the time loop happens, we're not going to talk about it. First of all, I want to nail down the idea that I really am an actual YHS fan. I'm not just speaking as somebody who watched the series as a young person and wants to look at it in a nostalgic way, but in fact, I'm a fangirl who routinely engages with the fanbase and source material to this very day. Is that a little sad? Should I actually get some good taste and watch something better? Well, yeah, duh. But it's just that I really do think that most people, when talking about YHS, don't realize that there is more to the series beyond a nostalgic factor. They might rewatch the series, but they still don't have the fandom angle necessary to properly analyze it. In other terms, I don't think people take it seriously. And that's gonna sound ridiculous because it is a Minecraft roleplay. But here's what I'm gonna say to that. If you're gonna take the time out of your day to look at YHS and then maybe look at YHS fan art and then comment, "How is this fandom still alive? LOL" under it, you should recognize that you're walking into a fandom space where people are taking this series seriously. I would even go as far to say that I think it's kind of disrespectful, which again is ridiculous. But here's the thing, I don't think this is even exclusive to YHS. It's just a little more noticeable because YHS is such a small fandom. But this is something I've experienced with other fandoms as well, like Total Drama, People like to look back on total drama, and yeah, it's goofy, you can make fun of it, but the point is that people still don't give it the time of day to really digest what's happening in the story. You don't have to get as attached to it as other people. But I don't like it when people act like it's impossible that people are genuinely attached to something that was created to have people invested in it. Even if it's in a slightly unconventional or bizarre execution. Like, it doesn't have to be nostalgia bait. It can genuinely be something worth watching for a reason. And on the other extreme end, pardon my attitude, but some people make baseless claims about YChess because they don't actually want to rewatch the series despite making TikTok edits about it. And although the nostalgia and horrible aging is definitely something that I can't ignore when making this video, I still have something I'm answering. I still have something to prove, beyond the obvious fact that this show was messed up and yet kids watched it. Because, obviously. And that being, can YChess actually constitute as a good series, or are people simply enjoying it as a time capsule? Well, regardless of what it is, some people are really blinded by nostalgia when looking at this series. However, my point of it being pretty surface level enjoyment is only proven when I bring up the fact that this undying loyalty to a flawed series is actually pretty ironic considering the story that takes place in the show. Because yeah, there are some people who will defend the show to their very last breath. From the very beginning of YChess, we know that something bad is going to happen. Even though the first few episodes are incredibly innocent, there's this uneasy atmosphere disjointed to the go-lucky cast that just proves some tragedy is going to be imminent. And yet, even with this in mind, we let ourselves become attached to the characters, even though some of them are clearly hiding something, or they aren't hiding anything at all, including their animosity. And that unconditional love in YChess is just the first step into its immersion. Countless times, characters become infatuated with one another, and they lose their cool because of it. And not in just a traditional romantic sense, but in a much crueler, esoteric way. Characters refuse to move on from deaths. Characters become metaphorically chained to their friends. Characters obsess over their hatred until the lines between romance, friendship, and hatred blur so much that there isn't really a point in viewing YChess relationships in the same lens that you would use on any other series. So where is it? Where is the love for YChess's love? Where should we look when we want to figure out the most bare minimum questions of, did Sam really love Yuki, or did Yuki really love Sam? Well, nowhere, because not many people think to question it, even the people in YChess. To the common eye, it's just surface level knowledge, and is commonly accepted for what it simply appears to be, teenage love. But if it was just surface level teenage love, then realistically, how would the things in YChess happen? If Sam loved Tortoise like we are primarily led to believe, then why did he stab him? But if Sam hated QUiNN, then why did he keep him around? And vague notions of, oh, he's just crazy, simply don't work. Because one, Sam is a more sensible person than people give him credit for. He's incredibly conscious of most of the things that he does. He really only becomes unhinged and dissociated from reality later on in the series. But even then, he's manipulative. So it's kind of hard to decide that he's unconscious of the things that he's doing. And that leads me to another thing. Samuel is not the greatest actor. He doesn't really paint Sam the character in a specific way because his idea of craziness is inconsistent. Like, yeah, Sam the character has a lot of unique quirks, and you can diagnose him with whatever you want, but at the end of the day, he's not being played as anything in specific. He's just anime stereotype of crazy, which is vaguely mentally ill, probably overlaps with a bunch of disorders, but he's not going to commit to playing a mentally ill character, so he doesn't actually have a specific diagnosis for himself. And I think that's the main issue with a lot of Sam analysis. There's a lot of talk of what he quote-unquote actually has, and it is interesting to try and make connections between disjointed actions, but at the end of the day, no matter what he has, he still commits the same acts, and with the same vague outline of a motivation. For love. I talk more in depth about Sam later on, but this is pretty much the baseline for a spiral, along with everyone else's. Everything in YChess is driven by love. Even if it may appear as animosity, devotion is still devotion. A simple human feeling that by all means should keep people sane, and yet in this series is a poison that consistently drives people to the brink. And this isn't only referring to Sam and Yuki, this is a phenomenon that happens with several characters, including some that you may not have even remembered until I brought them up. And for my primary example, I'm of course going to bring up Hidden Sentinels. Taking off my Star Force biased glasses, I can say with true confidence that Hidden is a perfect culmination of what YHS stands for. By all means, he's pretty normal in YHS, but if you had put him in the setting of any other roleplay, he would actually kind of stick out. His skin is literally the Burger King mascot in a uniform, and his whole shtick is that he's a prince, and somehow he's still an unimportant side character. But most importantly, he's a devoted man to an extreme fault. Hidden is mainly characterized by how calm he is, and yeah, that's just his personality, but if we're going into headcanon territory, I like to believe it's derived from his role as being a prince. Because yeah, he is legitimately a prince, he's just not a prince of something really great. Although he's likely trained to be diplomatic and it worked its way into his core person, it is heavily implied that his background of royalty is not totally stable. And the most notable scene of this is that he stumbles over his words, lying about his crown being gold when it's actually stainless steel. And you might be wondering, what does this have to do at all with what I was talking about? Well, Hidden is a calm person. He gets along with brash people like Dom even, because he doesn't feel threatened by them. However, we do see him become momentarily flustered over his crown's legitimacy, as well as the death of his lover, JTS the Dane. While the main trio hunts for a house, they come across a letter in Hidden's house, where they find out that JTS died while away at war. And this is sad on its own, but it then becomes a continued plotline in the half-canon Christmas special. I say half-canon because it doesn't really make sense. Anyways, in this episode, Hidden becomes genuinely deranged over the loss of JTS. He not only mourns, he spirals. He copes with his death by creating a dummy of him, and all of a sudden, his calm exterior returns. But we know it's just a mask now. This isn't Hidden being himself anymore. This is Hidden costuming as himself. And that's really what I want to hammer down here. The ensemble of YHS is something that makes it what it is. People can ignore the background characters as much as they want, but they don't get an actual grasp of the themes and the world building until they give justice to the people that fill it. And Hidden is only one example of the poisonous love that permeates throughout YHS. Another character that undergoes this trance is the Pylord, a character who speaks only in mumbles and yet has an incredibly loud entrance when they encounter Grian and Ellen. Why? Because Pi is in love with Ellen. And much like the Hidden and JTS plotline, this isn't something that comes out of nowhere. It's a continuous arc that you can spot from earlier episodes. So even when characters are off screen, you can tell that they're continuing to grow. They don't need spotlight to show who they are, which is something that the 2023 reboot actors aren't really familiar with. They only need to exist. And when they exist in YHS, they suffer from the same effects that any main character does. Sam feels inclined to stab Tortoise to defend his devotion to Yuki, while Pi is inclined to stab Grian to defend her own devotion to Ellen. Gareth becomes almost delirious from his depression prompted by both Jane's divorce and death. Well, Hidden becomes delirious when JTS dies. No matter how irrelevant the characters are to Sam, they all suffer the same fate as him, of being surrounded by intense love, of being victims to it, of being possessed by it. And that's what drives them all apart until they are then driven back together because they can't handle the separation. But love doesn't just result in violence, does it? Sometimes it results in something different, not in peace, but in something that lies right between the two. If YHS fails, not from a lack of love, but from the overabundance of it, then what does that mean for the apathetic? In a normal world, everyone could agree that death is unfortunate. Everyone could have some moral dilemma of whether or not it's okay to kill somebody, but would all ultimately agree on some basic standards, like death is inevitable, but kids still shouldn't have to explicitly see it. However, this is why chess. And the main modern criticism of why chess is that it was marketed towards children despite its heavy topics. So with that kind of meta commentary in mind, what does that actually mean for the children within the story itself? The first death that happens in Chess is actually not Professor Gareth's. Instead, it's a death that happens completely off screen to a character that we never officially meet until the prequel, Jane, Gareth's ex-wife, as well as the catalyst for a sudden mood shift in the series. Through Jane's death, Gareth becomes depressed and then takes his life to join her. But there's more to it than just that. It's not only her absence that led him to do what he did, but also how the people around him reacted to it as well. Once people found out that Jane was missing, people became infatuated with the theory that Gareth killed her himself, mainly Sam and Tortoise. But it's actually Invader who was the first person to bring this idea up, which I think is a really cool idea, because, like we already established, the side characters reflect a lot of the exaggerated traits in the main characters. Invader being the one to bring up this messed up theory that Gareth killed his wife is a reflection of how everyone in the town can react to mystery. Like, it reminds me of how they all brushed over the fact that Chan literally got arrested. Like, I know it was a false accusation and she was released, but none of the students still seem to really care. So when it comes to crime in the town, they either don't care or they just don't take it seriously. But I guess it makes sense because later on we find out that like 5 of them have Yakuza ties. And you know what? They still did it better than the 2023 reboot characters. It's also worth noting that Invader isn't a normal kid. Her dad is like one of 5 police officers in the town. Invader comes from a family of authority, and that still doesn't give her the attitude where she respects authority like Gareth. And during all this, Gareth was already reeling from the divorce, but now he had to deal with the allegations that he took her life. By the time that Gareth is dead, there's already a mass amount of apathy and insensitivity that shows just how the people in Chess cope with tragedy, at least tragedy that isn't personal to them. You don't need to love someone to feel bad that they died, but in Chess, the opposite rings true. In order for any tragedy to hold any weight, you need to be devoted. It's literally all or nothing. Either you obsess or you don't care at all. And once the students stumble across his body, this becomes even more apparent. Despite how polarizing this scene is, it actually is my favorite scene in the entire series. I could go on and on about it forever, because this scene exemplifies exactly what I'm trying to say. At first, they can only freeze up in shock and confusion. The sight of Gareth's death genuinely leaves them lost. And I know that's a regular reaction, but to me, I've always specifically viewed it as the fact that all of these teenagers are very used to making a joke out of all of these tragedies, and now that it's in front of them directly, tangible, and so close to being personal, they now have to cope with the fact that it's now a real thing that can happen, not just to somebody in a punchline, but to someone that they know. And while they're lost with little to no direction, something interesting happens. Sam takes control of the scatterbrained group. And this detail is one of the reasons why I love this scene, because a lot of people are under the assumption that Sam is either a total loser or completely heartless. But he's not shy or evil. He's just awkward. And that's exactly why in this scene, he becomes a leader. Sam, despite his predicament of being bullied and teased, is actually pretty good at taking charge. And this is something that you can find across the entire series. It's just that in this scene, you can actually see it pushed against the rest of the class. A group of people that typically would be bashing him for speaking out of turn. But they don't, because they're shocked, and then they detach themselves. Sam attempts to calm the group, but at some point, I don't think they need to be calmed. They actually all seem pretty level-headed, considering the corpse right in front of them. PD falls asleep, JTS is more concerned about his studies, and several other classmates join in on making jokes regarding Gareth's situation. But you know who does take it seriously? Star Force 36, and Sam. Most importantly, Sam. He actually seems pretty shocked that people are able to joke about Gareth. So it's nice to highlight this scene for his humanity. I don't really think Sam is empathetic, but I do think he has a lot of standards for what morals should be, and that's why he acts so different in the beginning versus later on. In the beginning, he's so used to being persecuted that he has to mask the fact that he doesn't really feel empathy, and so he has to abide by moral laws that he bases off of other people. But considering that a lot of side characters in YChess don't exhibit these morals, I wonder where he actually got them from. I wonder if Stanley taught Sam the wrong things, or Sam adopted these ideas from cartoons rather than the people around him. It kind of seems like no matter what Sam does, he sticks out, which is really sad actually. Anyways, with this scene coming to a close with everyone dismissed out of school, I think you can now realize just how vital the school's atmosphere is. Everyone at the school has some level of insensitivity. Their love itself might not be conditional because we see characters get obsessed for like very little reason, but their general care is. They're all slightly off the mark when it comes to morals, and that's what makes this original cast so special. They're all very cohesive, and because of their similar attitudes, they all help together to build to the overarching theme of YChess. Like, man, the originals just really knock it out of the park. They show how differently apathy can manifest. Every student in the classroom has their own unique personality, and yet they have the shared attitude of feeling disconnected towards the common tragedies. While some characters have some care or concern, these instances are few and far between, and aren't used to make the characters feel disjointed. They're used to make the characters stand out, which is why in universe they get socially alienated. I mentioned Star Force 36 as a joke earlier, because, well, if you know, you know. But I swear that I have an actual point here. He is a fantastic example of a character trying to be normal in an environment that rewards abnormality instead. His moral compass in the series is consistently based on our real-world ideals. He doesn't like insensitive jokes, he tries to protect Sam from bullying, and he properly sees death as something serious and horrible. And yet, despite his repeated efforts, Star Force is always ignored by the characters around him. And yes, this is just because it's Star Force as part of his characterization, but I think it says a lot that on top of this behavior with Star Force, Sam was also a victim of being constantly disrespected when he was pretty moral himself in early YChess. To have a real hand in YChess, you need to fight for it and be ruthless. This can either be overt with intimidating behavior, or it can be subtle and just found in your apathy instead. But regardless of which route it is, the attitude towards tragedy in YChess is what makes it work. Because if every character had the same moral standards as Star Force, then Gareth might have stuck around. Yuki would have been locked up much quicker. And most importantly, Sam probably wouldn't have spiraled as much as he did. Whenever people try to make their own portrayal of YChess, I find that they are ignorantly placing realistic standards onto the entire cast. But they don't realize that characters need to help the narrative move along. So why should YChess be any different? Just because it's distasteful because it was made in 2015? I think you can criticize this scene as much as you want, but personally I think that its problematicness kind of adds to the narrative that YChess is trying to spin. These 20-year-old somethings are vaguely 15 or 16 in YChess, so seeing them act so mature and so edgy just makes me read this scene as a commentary on how teenagers become obsessed with edgy media because they use it as a way to cope with the fact that dark subjects are dark for a reason. They don't want to confront the real consequences that come with tragedy, which, if you've been listening to me talk about the meta points of YChess, connects to how YChess itself is using a kid's medium combined with dark material to try and make it seem more palatable to younger audiences. So yeah, in YChess, characters need to be insensitive so that the tragedies can keep compounding onto each other until it's too much to ignore. And then when it's acknowledged, it's too much to handle, and the scars linger even after it's stopped. Because that's what YChess is all about. Nurturing a descent into madness, and then suffering the consequences as if you aren't the one partly responsible for it. A Along with everything else in YHS, you can bet that the protagonist is very polarizing. A lot of people say that YHS should have been led by Tortoise or even QUiNN, but I'm gonna disagree. If Tortoise was the protagonist, then we wouldn't really get the same atmosphere of descending into madness. Like, he's definitely the main character in the sense that nearly everything is driven by him, but Sam is the one actually putting things into action. He pushes himself into the situations so that we can actually view them, and the way that we view them is through him. So he frames everything in both the irrational perspective that YHS needs and the logical perspective that allows us to see his clear character grow. Because Sam's mental stability is so sporadic throughout the series that it's so easy to mold him for when the plot calls for it. He morphs into all extreme ends that one can have with sanity, so the viewer can properly understand the YHS mindset, what it means to not care at all, or have your care spiral into codependency. He has it all, and that's what we need. In early YHS, it's really obvious that Sam is a loser. He constantly clings to his best friend Tortoise, he still carries around a stuffed animal named Mr. Snugglemuffins, and he calls his mom before they go to class every day. But don't take this as me saying he's totally unaware of his own selfish agendas. As pathetic as he is early on, he's still morally dubious and relies way too much on Tortoise. That being said though, despite his clear knack for being targeted and clinging onto Tortoise like he needs him, he's actually a natural leader. Is this just because Sam is also the YouTuber filming everything, so he kinda has to direct the scenes himself? Well, yeah, but it's still a character trait that pushes things along within the universe itself. For example, although he clings to Tortoise, he's usually the one leading the pair around. And without Sam, Tortoise probably still would have caused all the early YHS events to happen because he's the direct sole cause, but things like the Tortoise 2 arc, well, they obviously wouldn't have happened. Not only that, but Sam is the reason why Yuki goes crazy at prom. Tortoise and Sam were both taking her out, and it's because of Sam's presence that Tortoise switches to Chan, which then causes Yuki to go crazy because Sam didn't actually want her. If Sam wasn't there from the beginning, Tortoise probably would have stuck with Yuki, and they might have actually gone out. Would their relationship be healthy? Well, no, but it wouldn't be as venomous as Sam and Yuki's relationship, because they're dating and they probably don't actually like each other, and they make it everyone's problem. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. Sam takes charge, sometimes he's listened to, but he still tries no matter what. And it's because of this that we get to see him evolve from someone who can't talk to people to someone who bosses Green around without any fear. But let's be honest, there's a reason why he has no fear when he does this. Beyond Sam's gradual development into becoming more authoritative, he also becomes more selfish, and that's exactly why he depends on Tortoise so much. Sam is codependent with Tortoise, but Tortoise isn't as overtly attached like he is. So when Sam's obsession with his best friend takes control, who suffers for whose gain? Tortoise suffers, and it's for Sam. The stabbing of Tortoise on Halloween is exactly what I mean, because Sam stabs him for a very superficial reason. He stabs him because he insulted Yuki, but we know that Sam doesn't actually like Yuki. He literally says so, and it's shown in the way that he treats her. And even if he did like her, why on earth would he be so violent to his best friend of years over a girl he didn't even want to go to prom with just a few weeks prior? I'll tell you why. It's for control. Because after Tortoise is stabbed, everything is fine. Sam is living in this fantasy that none of this really had repercussions. And in a way, he's right. Because once the morning hits, the only person that faces consequences is Green. And it's consequences for just being there at the wrong time. So then it transitions into the Tortoise 2 arc. And this entire arc is just evidence that Sam doesn't fully care about Tortoise himself. He cares about what Tortoise represents. He cares about having an object next to him. Somebody to depend on, because Sam, despite his leaderly personality, will never be independent. And this point is emphasized even more with Tokyo Soul. In Tokyo Soul, Tortoise gets cloned and then literally dies, but Sam immediately moves on and replaces him with just a clone. And at this point, Gran cannot afford to care, so he also kind of goes along with it, which has some interesting implications considering the Tortoise and Green relationship in Tokyo Soul. If you know, you know. Anyways, Sam's incessant need for control and objectification of people is something that reaches beyond even Tortoise. And I'm not talking about Green anymore, I'm talking about Yuki. Because Yuki and Sam, in my opinion, have a very push and pull dynamic. You can make arguments for whether or not they really loved each other, but then you'd have to question what that even means in this situation. YHS is fascinating when it comes to ships because the way it handles love tackles the idea that it can be equal no matter the connotation. It can be romantic, platonic, familial, But regardless of how you cut it, it's important and worth the violence. So with Sam and Yuki, they're technically in a romantic relationship, but you still have to wonder about what's actually going on between them. Is Yuki's love for Sam really pure, or is it just an obsession? And for Sam, is his love for Yuki an actual show of adoration, or is it just a convenience for him? Well, despite the idea of them being in a genuine crazy ex crazy romantic relationship, it's important to remember that their relationship is fundamentally transactional. The only reason why Sam gets into a proper relationship with Yuki is because her father, Karu, threatens violence if he doesn't follow through. And even beyond this initial interaction, Sam continuously treats their relationship as though it's a tool, rather than something to actually be invested in. And it gets so bad that it leads into the most popular plot point in the series, which is the Tortoise 2 arc. Throughout the Halloween episode, Sam uses Yuki as a threat towards people, and especially QUiNN. It's even because of Yuki that Sam gets the knife that he then uses on Tortoise. So once Tortoise is gone, Sam now has full grip on two weapons, his own violence and Yuki's character as a whole. From the start of their relationship and to the very end, Sam and Yuki utilize each other as tools or weapons because they're chasing a specific feeling that they can't find anywhere else. For Yuki, it might be genuine infatuation, whether it's romantic or not. But for Sam, it's the power complex that she hands him with a pretty bow on top. Which brings me to Tortoise, because unlike Yuki, there is one character that Sam cannot question his love for, and that's for Tortoise. Believe me, it's important to know the difference between Sam's love interest and, for all intents and purposes, his real partner. We're shown over and over again that Sam genuinely needs Tortoise to function. It's foreshadowed at the start through little things, like him being socially anxious and relying on Tortoise's confidence for reassurance. But then it quickly unravels, and we realize that Sam is more controlling than he initially let on. Not only does he need Tortoise, but he's convinced that Tortoise needs him as well. Let's look at Tortoise's relationship with Salix, for example. While Sam does seem supportive, he does it in a really objectifying way, because he's still masking and trying to abide by the norm that teenage boys should get girlfriends to prove that they're cool. But do you really think that Sam actually does care about having a girlfriend? Just look at how he acted around Suki. He never wanted her for her. He wanted her just so that she could fill a quota in his life. Does that sound familiar? Because that's exactly what he did with QUiNN when Tortoise was missing. He made him fill a quota as well. And it's this very straight and narrow line of logic that causes a divide between Salix and Sam when it comes to Tortoise. On one hand, Salix and Tortoise seem to genuinely love each other. They do all the typical things, like flirting and going on dates. But Sam is always there, and that's the anomaly. If he really supported their relationship as a sign of Tortoise's personal growth, then he wouldn't be forcing himself into the picture. Unless, of course, he expects Tortoise to objectify Salix as much as he does. Because Sam is turning Salix into an accessory even when he gets into closer contact with her, and she should become more than just a side character. But as we all know, this won't happen if that's not in his expectations for what her quota should be. She's there to be a quick thrill for Tortoise, and if he gets genuinely attached to her, then he's alone on that. If you think I'm grasping for straws, then let's also look at how Sam views Salix after she dies, because it does not get better. He constantly brings her up to tarnish Tortoise's memory of her, almost like he's convinced that if he turns her into a joke, then Tortoise will start thinking of her as one as well. Also, is it just me, or does it seem like Sam never really took Salix seriously in the first place? If Sam is able to do this so consistently, it makes me think that he never really thought of her as a person in the first place. Like he never thought that Tortoise really had a commitment to her, even if they were dating. She was always going to be there temporarily, so if she dies this quick, well, who's he to complain? And, oh my god, the way that Tortoise acts every time Sam brings up Salix after her death is such good acting, because he's consistently disheartened every time he does this. You'd expect from a series like White Chess, this dark comedy would be played out for laughs, but it's played straight. Sam is trying to crack a joke, but the punchline is too personal to actually be funny. And that's why the Samantha arc is just so messed up, by the way. Sam is parading around in Tortoise's dead girlfriend's clothes, and he expects him to laugh about it. They're best friends. They've always made jokes. And now suddenly Tortoise has the audacity to feel confused and uncomfortable that Sam is joking about something so serious. Lighten up, dude. It's just a dead girl. You never needed her in the first place. If Sam objectifies her into a joke, you should listen to him, because who knows better than Sam? Surely not you. In the words of Sam, Tortoise is strong. It's not like he's actually emotionally affected by these things, especially not things that Sam causes, and it's not like there's much more depth to him when all he's done is do stupid things that just makes people laugh. So how could he know better? There's only one person that should really matter to Tortoise, and that's his best friend Sam, who shows that he loves him the most. So what does that tell us about love? Yandere High School is a tragedy, and it's honestly pessimistic in how it views love. It treats something so sacred as though it's a curse that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Even that concept itself, life and death, is treated as something equally dispensable. Nobody ever really cares for one another, and when they try to, it's either too late or it's not enough. It's hopeless. But is that what White Chess is really trying to say? I don't think White Chess as a series is trying to tell you to be apathetic. I don't think it's saying to never love your friends or to disregard the very idea of companionship. Instead, I think it's actually the opposite, warning you of what happens when you go too far in one direction. Because when we see these characters obsess, it's not because love overall is too much of a feeling, and it's not even because they love too much. It's because they're trying to love, and that unnatural angle spins it out of control. In reality, it's waning, it's unrenewable, and so they push themselves so far into it because that's their only solace. They never learn how to connect with anyone else. So when they're at the altar, of course they don't even have a priest. It's only about the one parallel of them, their god, their lover, their best friend, or even just their prized memory. So I return to a question that I had initially brought up as rhetorical. Did Yuki really love Sam? Because I honestly don't think so. I think to an extent she had admiration for him, but she didn't love him as much as she was infatuated with the idea of him. I think on paper, she saw that they technically had things in common. They were nerds, they were both lonely, and they had no one to love. In reality, Yuki was able to fit in and Sam couldn't. At the end of the day, Yuki disregarded her friends as soon as she had eyes on someone else, whereas Sam's love for Tortoise is one of the only things that drives White Chess forward. At the end of the day, Yuki dies, choosing to separate from Sam, while Sam, at the end of Tokyo Soul, refuses to die, leaving him with the only people that he ever cared about. So with that in mind, does Yuki really love too much, or does she just pretend to? And can you even define what love is? It's an anomaly as much as it is seen as a gift. So, no, I don't think so, because White Chess is a series that doesn't want you to give up on it. I think White Chess just wants you to realize the weight that comes with it. Whether you weigh it lightly or heavily, it's still gonna come with so many connotations and risks that nobody in White Chess was prepared for. Because love is normal. It's nothing to worship, but it isn't something to fear. It's just, nobody in White Chess was normal. So they chased it, unrelenting, even when it led them to their own deaths. And that's how their cautionary tale was finished. Something I also failed to mention earlier is that because Yuki's love for Sam is so artificial, I kind of read it as a criticism of the Yandere archetype. The Yandere archetype has a lot of questions around it. It's problematic, but it's also vague and very revealing of the audience that tries to enjoy it. Because the thing with the Yandere archetype is that it's a fantasy, but when you look at most Yandere explorations, the love that people claim to want, even in fantasy, is artificial. It's always love at first sight. It's love for completely BS reasons. It's love because they fail to see the recipient's flaws in real dimension. So much so that's even become a common trope for Yandere characters to turn their darling into things like dolls. And basically what I'm trying to say is that the Yandere archetype is very often self-contradicting. We're expected to believe that the Yandere obsession is about genuine infatuation or unconditional love, but most Yandere portrayals has the exact opposite. We have Yanderes completely changing their darling and getting rid of the personality that they have because their love is shallow and is only about appearances or circumstances. But that doesn't make sense. If they're a yandere, they should have real love for their darling. And it's like first grade moral of the story to know that true love is for what's inside. And yet, nobody really says anything about this inherently mischaracterized trope. Because who cares about the motivations as long as the character is hot and covered in blood, right? And by the way, I'm not even talking about it in the sense of it's obsession, not love, since it literally isn't love, because these shallow motivations mean that you could switch out the darling for a similar looking mannequin and it wouldn't change a thing. It's never about the darling, it's about the so-called yandere, which, when I put it that way, doesn't that ruin the fantasy? Actually, doesn't that sound like Yuki and White Chess? That rant was a genuine complaint from me about the whole treatment of the yandere archetype, but it is relevant, because the more that I think about Yuki, the more that I think she kind of exposes the anime trope for being the fraud that it is. We're led to believe that Yuki is a yandere, and she's even designed to be one. She acts like any typical male-gazy female character with her, bruh girl personality in early YHS, while she also kills for her darling. But if you remember correctly, the darling that she kills for is Tortoise, even though her endgame darling ends up being Sam. Hey Yuki, aren't you a yandere? Are you meant to be loyal? That's strike one, girl. But hey, let's give her a pass. Maybe she just thought she loved Tortoise because he was always with Sam. And even if that's not true, you can still change targets, as long as you're fully locked in on that being your target, that is. Even when Yuki gets with Sam and she's convinced she loves him, she does the exact same thing that I previously criticized yandere characters for doing. She doesn't actually love him unconditionally. She doesn't actually love him as a whole, because we see her multiple times trying to make him behave in ways that do not fit the person that he is. Like, yeah, it's nice to be complimented, but how many times does Sam compliment even people that he does genuinely like? The majority of their interactions is either him using her or her using him to act a certain way. This means that her love for him isn't even stemming from him as a person. It's stemming from her need to have a person that fits this idea of a romantic fairy tale for her. Strike two, Yuki. One more, and you're out. Let's look at the finale of the series. Yuki's ending is probably the most telling of her character. Not the scenes of her manipulating Tortoise and Sam, not the scenes of her threatening QUiNN, but the scenes of her trying to avenge her father. I think what makes this scene especially stand out is that it's the one time where Sam actually gets through to Yuki. Not because she was blind to how he felt before, because, like, she knew, but because it's the one time where she actually lets it through. She doesn't deny it anymore, and she honestly never could. So, because of that, her fantasy is finally shattered. Sam isn't the person she loved. The person that she loved had never existed. At most, she just related to him, and because she knew that he would go along with all of her antics, she was happy to choose him. But now she can't even accept that, making it so that her final act is abandoning him. Yuki, you had one job as a yandere. If you were gonna die, you were meant to take him down with you. And also, he literally was like offering you peace. If you were a real yandere, you would have taken that and locked yourself up so that you could, I don't know, like plan an escape to get him back. But as she says, they're never gonna take her alive, because this is about her now. She can't pretend it's for Sam. She can't pretend it was ever for anyone else. Not some yandere love for Sam or Tortoise. And so I think Yuki having all of these traits that are commonly found across other false yandere characters and having it all culminate into a self-aware bad ending is YHS's final deconstruction of what people imagine love to be, because even a fantasy of dark love won't work. Okay, before we start talking, I'm gonna lay down some ground rules. 1. Do not hunt down or harass anyone involved with anything. Be normal, especially when the majority of people involved are young. 2. I'm not going to talk about anything old. Do not come into my comments with any "it happened XYZ years ago" BS. Majority of what I'm talking about takes place 2022 and over. This is stuff that's currently happening or happened like only a handful of years ago. And so 3, anything problematic in YHS itself will be addressed by the following statement, and that is it. In regards to the actual series, I personally try to go by the rule that everything in YHS was collaborative. If there's something problematic found in the actual show, you can't just blame Samuel as much as you may want to. At the end of the day, who was playing Pete and Pepe in the racism arc? Not Sam. And who knows if he was even aware of this new subplot since the show was improvised. So even though he was producing and directing the show, it's not all his fault. And even if it was, like when he makes jokes about enslaving the tortoise clones and his many off-color comments, it's still from years ago, and I'm willing to bet that your humor from 2015 is not the same as it is today. People mature and the internet climate was just really different back then. With that being said though, do not take this as a pass on everything done. It's still weird and should be treated as such, especially since Samuel does go on to repeat these same behaviors in our modern day. However, I believe it is an unfair criticism on his character when you discredit the rest of the context in OG YHS and you aren't even using critiques on things he's currently doing in tandem. That's it, okay? If you have any further questions about OG YHS's morality, take it to the damn comments. However, before I do talk about the contemporary discourse on Samuel, I do want to take a moment to address 2 other creators involved in YChess who might also have some discourse on them. But discourse is a light word to describe it. They're weird. I'm not going to go too in depth on Yuki's actor Andy's situation, but it is something that I still feel obligated to mention considering he got his platform from Yandere High School, and then later on abused that same platform to do terrible things. So long story short, he was weird towards his child actors, he was a bad manager, and just overall horrible to be around. There's a great video describing this in detail by Mug and Mile, who was actually a part of his original crew, and of course, the original Andy callout tweet that got released on October 22, 2023. I'll be linking both of these in the description, so I'd really rather you guys hear about these experiences from people who are directly affected. But again, I mentioned this briefly because Andy is an integral part of YChess. He played the main antagonist and still continues to be a fan favorite to this very day. I do want to clarify though, Andy did all of these things outside of YChess, and credit where it's due, Samuel did not endorse this behavior. Which sounds like bare minimum, but considering how many Minecraft YouTubers turned out to be creeps, I guess he has that one thing over them. Good job, Samuel, you're better than your Tokyo Soul 2 co-star Einstein. As for the second creator I want to mention, Ellen's actor is also not great, unfortunately, although there is a Twitter thread about this situation as well, which I will be linking. I'm gonna go over this with a bit more detail than I had with Andy's situation because it's not as widely known. Around a month after Andy was exposed for being weird, a Twitter thread on Ellen was created. On November 13, 2023, a person named Artist released a bunch of screenshots that revealed Ellen had been doing extensive ERP with a minor in 2015. Allegedly, Ellen did not know the age of their roleplay actor. But how far do you get with ERP before you start to think to yourself, I should probably age check this person? So in response, Major Ellen, in a grand stroke of genius, created a doc in which they actually addressed the allegations, except they then proceeded to delete it. I did manage to find a few excerpts, but that's really the most quotation that I can give you with certainty. However, I do thankfully remember a few details from when I first read the doc. Do take these with a grain of salt though, since I'm not really able to back it up for the reasons I stated before. He deleted the doc. First of all, I remember they spoke about people continuously trying to tear them down, so this wasn't something really surprising to them. But I'm gonna be honest and say I never heard of these allegations before this thread, so I'm not sure how public this really was before then. And secondly, for some reason, Ellen had gone off on a completely different tangent at the end of their doc, where they started ranting about PD Power Dragon of all people. Apparently, there was beef between them because PD took too long to get an item for a show and tell scene. It was something like that, but I do remember it being really dumb. Also, PD responded to Artist's original thread about Ellen, so I'm convinced that Ellen only spoke about PD because he had supported the thread from the get-go. I mean, if you were being exposed for being weird and your previous associates didn't argue against it, that probably looks really bad on you. Anyways, even if you don't believe these allegations, because I'm not going to tell you to believe anything, Ellen just also acts pretty strangely on Twitter. They love AI, just like Samuel, and they also like using the N-word and being transphobic. Which is ironic considering Ellen plays a non-binary character in YChess. And it's not like they're ignorant of how their character is perceived in the fandom. They know their character is lauded as a genderqueer icon. So what the hell is this? Hey, I'm editing, but I decided to come back in because I wanted to add 2 more things. First of all, even though the victim in the thread did say they didn't want to pursue the Ellen thing in 2020, I decided I wanted to talk about it because it was already out there. And secondly, Ellen's still weird towards children. I'm not going to go into detail about their situation specific, but Ellen as a whole is still weird towards kids. Like my friend, after the Ellen thing came out, they unfollowed Ellen and didn't want to be associated with them anymore. By the way, they were like 15 or 14 during this, and Ellen DMs them and was trying to guilt them into liking them again. Like, that's weird, that's a child, that's probably not the smartest thing to do after being accused of being a predator. Secondly, technically, we don't know the race of Ellen. Maybe they are black, but I kind of doubt it because looking through Ellen's account, the way that they behave around, the N-word, it comes across as treating it as like a spectacle or a punchline, and that seems like something only a non-black person would do. So that's what I think. Maybe Ellen's black though. If they are, I don't know why their VTuber model doesn't reflect that, but I would retract this statement. but the trans thing, the kids thing, still stands. Anyways, this video isn't about Andy or Ellen, but I'll say this for the final time. They got their influence from YChess. They were involved in YChess, and I wouldn't want to gloss over them if I'm going to address any other discourse revolving around the series. So if I just made your favorite character feel bitter now that you know where they came from, I'm sorry, but it's good to just know about these things. There's also Einstein and Jimbop, but I'm not going to say anything about it because we all know. They're like the most commonly known out of the discourse, but I'll just mention it. So now let's move past these characters and finally tackle the bunny in the room. Samuel Samgladiator, England. So the stuff I'm about to say may actually feel surprising to you guys because the platformed Samgladiator discourse throughout the years has been pretty tame, I guess. Neutral enough that people could just push it under the rug and pretend nothing happened beyond a cancellation attempt. Although I will say that perhaps this is because I feel like a lot of the information that was, pushed around was kind of muddy, and I feel like a lot of the wrong things were being criticized. Also, it was 2020. A lot of people had too much time on their hands. But that's besides the point. Because even if we ignore all of that, Samuel still persists to be one of the strangest people I have ever seen. So strange, in fact, that he's able to spread rumors that QUiNN essayed Silly Jilly when they had met at a Minecraft convention. Now, it would be naive to act as though this rumor hasn't been spread to his modern YChess reboot crew, but then that also begs the question, for how long were these people sitting on these allegations? Because I don't know about you, but I think I'd find it really weird if my boss continuously spread rumors about a content creator that I liked, his former associate, since let's face it, he's lying about one of the most popular Minecraft creators. Also, the majority of the reboot crew liked Hermitcraft or were familiar with it, so did they just believe the allegations and didn't care? Or did they know they were fake and yet they just sat on it and never acknowledged how weird it would be to lie about that? Much to think about. And even beyond that, I do have my own personal gripes with the crew. I feel like a lot of them are pretty disrespectful. However, I'm willing to admit something that I feel like a lot of commentary YouTubers neglect. These people do not have platforms. There's not really a point in trying to call them out when they don't really have anything to lose in the first place. Instead, it might just be giving them more attention. So let's keep talking about Samuel so I can finish this section with one more thing. As much as I don't think YChess can be used as a tell for people's moral character because it was made in 2015, there is merit to the criticism when you consider the fact that a lot of things that you can criticize YChess for are things that Samuel continues to do. Whereas other people might have changed and don't make the same jokes, Samuel has not. Samuel is still transphobic. And also, Samuel still continues to have minors work on his series despite it being mature. Sure, back then you could blame it on people not really knowing how the series was gonna go, but Samuel knows how YChess is. He's gone through years of it being sensitive material, and yet he's still working with 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, etc. as a 30-year-old man, knowing that this is content that's not even going to be geared towards their age group intentionally. So yeah, I don't like Samuel, and maybe this is biased because I do have friends who've had personally bad experiences with Samuel, but if other people can be biased about Samuel in the opposite direction, then I can be biased in my own way. Alright, so before we get into this part, I want to say that this is an unscripted section of the video where I go over a survey that I released to the YChess fandom in December of 2025. Yes, this video has been in production for that long. In this survey, I didn't really ask that many questions. I just asked, when did you discover YChess? I asked if people wanted to name themselves. Then I asked, how has YChess impacted you? And finally, I had an optional question where I asked, are you thankful to have known YChess? If I sound like I'm speaking really softly, it's because my voice is really tired. So this part of the video might not be edited a lot, but it might also still have the most stuttering. So I apologize, but this is just for people who wanted to hear more about the YChess fandom. And in doing so, I got 44 responses. That might not seem like a lot, but considering how small the YChess fandom is, I actually think that's like over the amount of people I expected, because while I was looking through the names, I noticed that a lot of the people who name themselves are both lurkers, frequent posters, and mutuals who don't really talk about YChess anymore, but I befriended them ages ago when they did. So I think it's cool that we have responses from both old and new fans of YChess. Since we're talking about names, I should say that the stats only 13 people out of 44 responses chose to not name themselves. And everyone else that I saw were people that I have spoken to at least once or twice. And that's something you can appreciate about small fandoms like YHS. It really gives you a sense of community. For the stats of when did you discover YHS, I decided to split the answers into increments of 2 years. So we had 2015 to 2016 as one answer, 2017 to 2018 as one answer, and so on and so on. And so I put the timeline 2015 to 2023, and then 2023 was like 2023 and above. Interestingly, there were no answers for 2019 to 2020. That was kind of surprising to me, but actually I think it makes sense. Dream SMP, even if it was big, YHS is more of a full-on roleplay. It's more traditional. So for quarantine answers, 3 people did vote for 2021 to 2022, but nobody voted 2019 to 2020. I think it's more likely that people got into Hermitcraft during that time rather than YHS. Unsurprisingly, the most common answer was 28 people responding 2015 to 2016. So that's over 60% of the answers. And of course, the follow-up was the following year, 7 people voting for 2017 to 2018. Also, I think people who didn't grow up with YHS, but they found it through like Hermitcraft or QUiNN content, those people would have found YHS like past 2018. Even though that's like a majority of YHS fan content, I still feel like those kinds of people, they would not have been perusing the YHS tag to find this survey. So if this survey was more widespread, I feel like majority would still be 2015, but it probably would have been tied more with like 2021 answers. But because the survey didn't reach those kinds of fans, the answers for 2021 was like way lower. And of course, we also have, like I mentioned, 2023 and above was all grouped into one answer. 6 people responded 2023 and above. And I decided to make 2023 and above the base year because 2023 is when the reboot was like actually becoming a series. 6 people responding with that. That would have surprised me like 2 years ago, but after talking to people who I met through the reboot resurgence, it actually doesn't surprise me. For the long form answer, how has YHS impacted you? As much as I would like to sit here and read through all of 44 responses, unfortunately, a lot of them are really, really long and I don't have time to do that. But I did write down some statistics I gathered from reading through all of them. And also, I'll still put down some interesting lines and excerpts on screen right now. So now I'll read the statistics. Someone cites YHS as a direct cause for their career. 5 people cited YHS for their queer awakening. 2 people tried to self-promote in the survey. And 3 people cited negative experiences with the cast or Samuel himself. So never meet your heroes, I guess. But you shouldn't be like idolizing Minecraft YouTubers anyways, especially after like the past 5 years, you know? And now for the actual final question. That was optional. I got 42 responses for it, so only 2 people omitted their responses. 2 people said mixed feelings, 2 people said no, and then 38 people said yes. And that's kind of surprising, actually. Even though I'm not telling you all of the long form answers, majority of them talked about, you know, something negative about the series. A lot of them were like ashamed to say that they did like YHS. And even in the yes answers, a lot of people wrote down like, unfortunately, and it's trash, but I love it, etc., etc. But like, if you're ashamed to like YHS, I don't know why you took the survey in the first place, you know? I mean, I know it's not the greatest series. I've said that multiple times, but I like it, you know? I mean, if you can sit here and watch this video, if you can sit here and answer a survey about whether or not you like YHS, at some point you have to confess, you know, there's merit to be found in this series. Why does nobody want to admit that? You know what? Never mind. What am I talking about? I'm sorry. I don't know if I can do this. When I made this video, I wanted it to be a declaration of love for YHS, but The more I look through these answers and the more I sit here and talk about my thoughts in YHS, I keep catching myself saying things like, these details were unintentional. This is just an Easter egg. These are things that I think. But how many times can I say that before admitting that maybe this series isn't good? If nobody takes this stuff seriously, like not even the creators or the actors, then what's the point of me making this video? To cope with the fact that I'm obsessed with my childhood, a childhood that honestly wasn't that good. I should have put my time into literally anything else. I should have been studying. I should have been working. I should have been growing up. I'm sorry, I need a walk. I can't do this.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another beautiful green video. Today we're going to be covering how to build a nice childhood home. And you know me, it's going to be rustic. Sounds nice, doesn't it, QUINN? QUINN, before you do anything rash, listen to me. I know what you're going through. 10 million dirt blocks later and I still haven't made a mark high enough to reach the sky. But how much does the checkpoint really matter if I'm never going back? This is hardcore, QUINN. It's our one chance at happiness. You don't have to destroy the village, but if you loot it and must leave for greater things, then you have to do it. There's no point hesitating. Do you understand? I'm sorry for what I've put you through, but the portal's waiting. It's time to end this.
But at the end of it all, we still have to ask ourselves one question. Is YHS good? Now, I could sit here and be neutral and tell you I have mixed feelings about it. I could tell you it's bad, but there's some cool parts to it, or it's trash, but it's my trash. Hypothetically, I could say all that, but as valid as those statements are, I feel the need to take a stand because it would be unfair to pretend I'm neutral on a series that has had me in a chokehold for the past decade. From the moment I watched YHS, something changed in me. And it's no exaggeration to say that you can still tell YHS has influenced the way I interact with things in my day-to-day life, with my art. I've grown a sympathy for overly edgy pieces of work because I've started to see the beauty in being unapologetically cringe. So, with that being said, as much as I criticize it, it's stuck with me. And if there's anything that art is meant to do, art is meant to stick with you. Art is meant to give you a feeling. And what has YHS done if not given me thousands of hours of unrelenting feeling? So you can tell what I'm gonna say. You ready? I think YHS Yandere High School by Samgladiator 2015. I think it's a good show. I know that objectively it's not that good. I know it's not for everyone, and I'm not gonna pretend I don't feel guilt when I promote it. But even though I feel these things, something in me still wants to keep creating. YHS has been a creative outlet for me for so long that I honestly don't know what I would be doing if YHS hadn't influenced the way I write. If I can be vulnerable with you for a second, I first started thinking of this video in 2022. Yes, I got into YHS at 2015 when it was first released, but I only started realizing the fandom in 2020. And when I saw it, I was so astonished because to me it was so beautiful that people took this seriously. People saw what was just a cringe, edgy, of the times Minecraft roleplay, but they still decided to take it seriously because they saw the merit in it. They recognized the beauty in it and that in itself was beautiful to me. So 2 years later in 2022, I took my first step and I fully committed to becoming a part of the YChess fandom. And for the past 4 years, I've had crazy experiences because of the show. Ask any of my friends and they will tell you that they've watched me lose my mind over not only the show, but also the fandom, the creators, my own personal YChess agenda, because I was starting to realize I can't believe I'm fully committing to a series this hard, and of all series, it's Yandere High School. But isn't that kind of cute? Like, at the time, that was, 8 years later, and I was still obsessing over a series that most people would have in their DNI at that point. But admittedly, I was probably part of the reason why at some point. I'll be the first to admit it. I get aggressive over things I like. I love to gatekeep. I love feeling niche. I love being contrarian. But I think most of all, I love understanding things. And when I feel like something isn't being understood, of course it's gonna drive me crazy. And I think that, perpetual state of emotion, for me when I was growing up, especially in the years of being in high school, that totally messed me up, dude. I was already having trouble regulating my emotions, and now I had something to fully hyper-focus on, and it was not doing me any favors. I've gotten into arguments over the show. I've gotten unironically mad over people over the show, and I've lost friendships just as much. However, like I said, I owe everything to the series, and I fully believe that all of these instances were needed for me to grow, because now that I've grown up, I can look back on these things and I can realize that was bad, but these were the mistakes that I deserved to make. Other people my age can have breakups. Other people my age can go through friendships that break their heart. They can lose their mind over school, but for someone like me who's only focused on things that I truly do care about, these were the things that I needed to make mistakes over. And I needed a space where I could realize that making these mistakes was good. I could grow from them. So, this is getting long, but this is my personal statement, so forgive me. I love hearing my voice, but I really am grateful to know the show. I genuinely feel indebted to it. I've grown so much as a person, as an artist, and as much as I've lost friends, I've made so many great friends that I hope I can keep close to later on in the future. These are people I care about. Just a few years earlier, you would have asked me and I would have said, these are just people I talk to occasionally on the timeline, but these are people I talk to daily now. Because if they've seen me bare my soul for a stupid series made in 2015, and they still stuck around despite that, those are the kind of people that deserve to stick around in your life as a whole. Maybe even more so than the 2015 MCRP itself. I'm gonna tell you something. I started writing this in 2022, and I've rewritten it countless times. But I didn't fully start production in December of 2025. And over the course of these 7 months, I realized something important. I can keep making this video over and over, but I'm never going to be fully satisfied with it because my thoughts on it keep changing. So I just have to bite the bullet and go with my core feeling, and my core feeling of this series is gratitude. And this is mainly connected to one thing. Just last week, I graduated from high school, and it's ridiculous, but graduating while making this video really made me realize, oh my god, I'm growing up. I can keep making videos, I can keep making fan art, fanfic of this series for another 5 years on the internet, but every time I take a step forward, I'm getting further away from YChess because as much as I want to hold on to it, it's not coming home with me. I want to bring this home with one final point. Yandere High School, As much as I believe it's ruined me in many ways, I can't imagine growing up any other way. I think I've come to the conclusion that the reason why YChess is so important to me, it's really a memorial to the childhood that I had as a lonely kid watching Minecraft because she couldn't relate to the other kids in her playground. And I know I'm repeating myself at this point, but I really just want to hammer it down. I'm an adult now. I'm not the little girl writing YChess self-insert fanfic anymore. I'm going to college. That's Queubee 1, Samgladiator 0, because he's still stuck in high school. YChess is never going away. However, I think that's just what YChess is always going to be. It's a mistake. It's a memory. It's everything you want to be, and it's everything you're trying to steer away from at the same time. Yandere High School is a stain on our childhoods.